thank you for being here. Today, we're going to be talking about a great, fascinating topic. We're going to be talking about augmented cities. So the use of augmented reality to bring content, digital content, into physical location. And there's a whole new world around this. And today, we're going to be talking about a groundbreaking experiment and live deployment of an augmented city that was unveiled in Los Angeles on October 22nd, so just a few weeks ago. And it's called DTLA Augmented. And to give us an in-depth view about what this is about and how this project was designed and executed and some of the outcome, it is my pleasure to have Nick Griffin with us today. Nick is the executive director for the downtown LA BID, the Business Improvement District, and he's been working on this from A to Z, from inception to its launch. Probably did not sleep for 5 months to get this done. But we're glad to have you here, Nick. So I'm going to pass it to you, and I'm going to ask you to also write down your questions, because we're going to give time at the end for everybody to chime in and ask Nick some questions. So Nick, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, and thanks everyone for coming. This was a super exciting project. It was sort of all-encompassing for several months. Nicholas and his team at Hoverlay were amazing partners on this, but it was also a real group effort on the bid side. I might have been the mad scientist who came up with the idea, but Cassie Lujan was our like superstar project manager who really made it work, and then Kevin Begovich is our in-house graphic designer who really did a lot of the look and feel. So it was undoubtedly a group effort. We have a great marketing team who participated. So I will just kind of jump in. As Nicholas said, this is a project that began occurring to me kind of at the end of 2019. There was a great conference that some of you may have seen called Augmented Cities up in Oakland. It was co-sponsored by I can't remember who it was, but it was a great conference, and there was a sort of sense that augmented reality was on the tipping point, and that cities were going to be a really interesting use of augmented reality. And I really tapped into that. I just have this sense that is very much the case, that there are going to be myriad uses for augmented reality in cities. And so I began exploring, how could we possibly approach this? And that effort sort of accelerated in the beginning of 2022. Still in the pandemic, and feeling like we needed programming that people could do that wasn't necessarily inside, things that they could engage with, that was, that would be compelling, but that also would bring them to downtown. And it was really, that was a key part of it. Like we're the Downtown Business Improvement District. We are interested in bringing people to our district physically, in person. And so that's a critical component of this. Little background: we had developed a virtual reality tour platform the year before, which was great for enabling people to tour downtown from other places. But what we're really interested in, as I said, is actually getting them here. So I'm gonna go through these slides fairly quickly, and there'll be plenty of time afterwards. So type in questions to the chat or save them for after. So what is it? Grand Avenue Augmented is an augmented reality experience. We sort of started calling it a tour, and it was an exhibition, and we settled on experience because it was kind of all of the above. The idea was to showcase our major cultural institutions, properties, public spaces of this very specific area, Bunker Hill, 5 blocks of Grand Avenue, extending from the library on the south end to the music center on the north, for anyone who knows the Grand Avenue area. This was also, though, meant to be, and is, the inaugural program of our DTLA Augmented channel. So we very much intend, and it was in the back of our mind as we were producing Grand Avenue Augmented, we very much intend for this to be a platform that we can produce all kinds of content on, whether it be artistic, commercial, promotional, community, there's a wide range of things we can do, and I will talk a little bit about sort of how our approach to this project was informed by that broader goal. So produced and curated by the Downtown Center bid, comprised of content from a range of local partners and local artists, and then hosted on a dedicated Hoverlay channel. And let me just give another shout out, not just to Nicholas and the Hoverlay team, but to the Hoverlay platform, because we went through quite a bit of evaluation of how to do this, how to do an augmented reality project for downtown. And the approaches ranged from a purpose-built app that we would create ourselves, to working with a creative agency who would do all the content, to other pre-existing apps. And we landed on Hoverlay for a couple of reasons. One, it's an existing app. It does what we wanted it to do. It was going to be affordable for us to do. We're a nonprofit. We're not a big corporate brand agency or anything. But possibly the most important reason was it was very user-friendly, both on the consumer side for the people who experience it, but even more importantly on the creator side. This is developed as a publishing platform, and the back end is really user-friendly. And the reason that's important to us is that we wanted to develop this as a platform, a content and communication platform that is as easy for us to develop and use as our website. We have an in-house graphic designer. We want him to be able to create stuff in-house on the fly for no cost, whenever we want. Now, granted, if we do bigger stuff, we may hire artists, we might work with a tech firm, we might work with a cultural institution to create more advanced programming. And we certainly did that on this project. But we also wanted it to be something that we could really create stuff on the fly, quickly, in-house, at little cost. And Hoverlay's platform enables that 100%. So just to give a little bit of context, 25 partners. This is why I didn't sleep for 5 months, because juggling 25 partners is challenging. It was cultural institutions, property owners, local businesses, Mocha, the Broad, Walt Disney Concert Hall, Music Center, Grand Park, Brookfield, Silverstein, like you name it. And that was both the great sort of superpower of it, but also the great challenge of it. 25 locations overall along that 5-block route, 45 activations. And I'll get back to this a little bit because it was everything: art installations, virtual performances, interactive holograms, immersive environments, audio experiences. So when we started, we thought, okay, well, we're doing a sort of an art exhibit, and maybe we have like a dozen activations, and that'd be cool. But we concluded as we started that we didn't know where it was going to go. We didn't know what this was going to become. And we very intentionally chose to be very open to where it could go and what shape it might take. And in order to do that, we decided to cast a very wide net on what we would include in this. Historical, informational, promotional, partly because we also wanted it to be a test of augmenting the city, not just an AR art exhibit, but a broader conceptual sort of test of like, okay, what are all the things you could do to augment the city? And so we cast this very wide net. We also did that because we assumed half or more of them wouldn't work, right? And so we said, okay, so we'll get as many balls as we can going, assuming that a big chunk of them aren't going to work out. But we'll still end up with enough, because we wanted to have enough of a critical mass that people would feel like, yes, this is a real thing. We didn't want 5, activations and people like, it's. So the irony, of course, is that we get dozens and dozens of activations going, assuming a lot of them won't work out. Most of them work out. And so what that meant was it really swelled in terms of the amount of content. And as you can imagine, the amount of work involved in all that content. This would have been much more manageable if we would have been only doing a dozen, but it was much more exciting doing as many as we did. 30 plus artists and creators involved in this project, which was one of the fantastic things about doing it, and I'll get into a little more detail on that. 5 months from kickoff to launch, not nearly enough. It was a sprint, and it was challenging. We would ideally have, started earlier, or scaled it down, but it is what it is, and it worked. So we have had over 600 downloads of the app and over 6,000 views of the activation since we launched a month or so ago. And really importantly, particularly for business improvement districts, but for anyone really, this is catnip for social media. Like, it plays, the content on this plays so well on social media and is so popular and compelling on social media that enables us to not only promote the exhibit itself, but to use the content from it as this great promotion of downtown. We've had 100,000 plus impressions over social and digital media, so that's been super successful on that front. So the initial goals: attract and engage visitors, residents, and workers. Activate Grand Avenue. We wanted people doing stuff on Grand Avenue, showcasing the cultural institutions and these great properties and places, supporting local artists, and then in a sort of general way, promoting and positioning downtown as a place of innovation and creativity. So as I mentioned, we decided to go broad with this, and that meant this really wide palette of artist showcase, specifically ARR, local business promotions, property showcases, architecture and urban design, really a range of stuff that we had on it. Hold on one second. And as I said, part of that was because we really felt like there was opportunity in each one of these areas. I mean, what was one of the most, sort of exciting things about working on the project was when we would talk to an artist and they had a concept, or at one of our workshops, and we would think, oh my God, like, you could do a whole exhibit just on that. Like, we could do a whole history exhibit. We could do a whole exhibit on architecture and urban design, on performances. And so that was affirmation that we had sort of landed on something that could be more than just this exhibit, but could be an ongoing platform for content. So one of the sort of strategic decisions we made, which I feel like was a really smart one, was that we developed sort of two approaches. We came up with some sort of templates. This on the left side, in-house, these were like sort of templates, standard digital asset things that we could really do in-house without requiring the partner to do much work, just using existing content that they had, photos, us shooting green screens. We did a bunch of green screens in-house. That was fairly low cost and easy to do. We created the holograms out of that. Doing the 360 photos was fairly easy. We had a photographer, a great guy, Jim Newberry, who shot all the 360s, and he's able to just go in half an hour, capture it, pretty easy and low cost. So we had this whole category of things that we could go to our partners and say, listen, you can pick from this, laundry list of things that you can do. And it will be very low cost and very low effort for you. In fact, we'll do it for you. And that was really helpful in getting people involved in something that otherwise was a new thing that they didn't necessarily know how to do or even what to do. And that was a big part of it. When we would talk to partners, we'd be like, well, what would you be interested in? And they didn't know how would they? It's a new thing. And then the other side was for more original content. And this was the partnerships where whether it was working with one of the cultural institutions or a visual artist to create original content, which was more involved. The process of creating it was more involved. It was, less of a cookie cutter thing. And I'll show you a bunch of examples of that. But that was obviously really helpful for producing sort of the really top, more pioneering content that we have in it. There was a real good balance between the in-house that was sort of, easier and simpler, but gave us a critical mass of stuff, and the other ones which were kind of the high profile. So I'm going to walk you through a few of the examples of these. First, the in-house ones.
Next time you're in downtown LA and you see some murals like this, take a pause, have a look, enjoy the art, enjoy the city.
So this was a great one. Man one, he had, oh wait, it should continue on. Hold on a second here. Yes. So this is showing, so US Bank had actually created this mural exhibit on the 72nd floor of their tower. And you can see it in the little inset there. And so all we did was we shot that and then placed it in McGuire Gardens, publicly accessible, and added Man One and his hologram as a way to make this exhibit accessible to the general public. And so it was great because it was existing content. All we had to do was shoot that, put it on the platform, shoot Man One as a hologram on green screen. That was fairly easy to do. And there we had a great exhibit that didn't cost, or great activation that didn't wasn't too heavy a lift, even though it looks pretty cool. Next one. This is the US Bank Tower. This is an example of the 360. You see in the inset, that's Jim Newbury up on the helipad shooting the 360. So you walk in there and then you are in this 360-degree environment of the US Bank Tower. So it's a space that, the general public doesn't usually get a chance to go and see. And it was a lot of fun to do it. People loved this one. So that was Cal Edison, this great journey through the 30s. Again, fairly straightforward to do. They had a bunch of imagery from that period. We placed it in there, added the jazz soundtrack. But this is a great example. I could see doing a whole historical exhibit of downtown LA, sort of how it looked, like a then and now sort of exhibit. Another 360 here. This is the LA Opera House. And then you're inside the opera and you actually see the stage itself. So again, something that folks don't necessarily get to see every day.
My name is Daniel Holzman. I'm from New York, the Big Apple, Manhattan, center of the slice. And this is Danny Boy's Pizza. Welcome.
Yeah, so working with Danny was great. This is obviously a much longer one. He talks all about, his sort of philosophy of pizza. But again, a great example of how you could do something really simply and straightforward. All we did was shot him on green screen and did 3D capture of the pizzas, and you've got yourself a great fun promotional exhibit there, or activation. So we could do this and will do it for lots of businesses around downtown. So really fun template, and we did a whole range of augmented banners where essentially there's an existing banner there for LA Phil, in this case, the theater company, all the different cultural institutions. You hold up your phone to it, that still image all of a sudden becomes this great video. All we needed for that was, a copy of the image and a copy of the video, and we pull them together, and you have, an automatically multimedia advertisement where there's normally just a banner. Colburn School was one of our best partners. They had these guys do this, and we filmed it on green screen in their on their stage, and then placed it outside. But we're really excited. They're excited about doing all kinds of things. We want to do. They have a whole dance program, so we want to do choreography out in their plaza, all kinds of performances. It's a great use of the technology and a great way to promote Colburn, and for their students to learn how to utilize the technology. So now getting into some of the sort of unique content, custom content. Leah Smithson was just a superstar. She did a couple projects in this. We're just showing one of them here, but I encourage you to see the others, because she's really a superstar in this field. This sort of beautiful, haunting, sculpture that floats around and goes up and down and sort of just turns this normal corporate plaza into this kind of wild, place. Another one, the Angel's Landing. Daniel and Anna were just, fantastic to work with. They created this beautiful piece, which also had a number of other elements to it. You could create photos of yourself with wings. There's an AI element that we're exploring, but just the idea of bringing the angels. Anna had this great sort of story about the sort of angels that reside in Los Angeles, and bringing that to life. That was very compelling, and we feel like we could do a lot with this one too. So Luciana Abate did this great piece. She had done something similar for the Luminex exhibit, and she did this for us up at the Music Center. It was kind of the perfect location. You have these colonnades, and we figured out a really cool way to place it too. You sort of lined up a stencil, and it then set perfectly on those colonnades, and people just love that. Everyone's taking pictures of themselves under the waterfall, which was, one of the great things about the whole thing was the interaction that it created. People were running around, like, looking at these things, and you have a whole group of people staring in their phone looking at this thing, and other people come out and say, "Hey, what are you looking at?" And they're like, "Oh, you got to see this," and they share it with them. "Oh my God." And then they do it. It was really, it was wonderful to see, and it was one of the big takeaways of this was the communal aspect of it, and the sort of physical place aspect of it. This one here was beautiful. This is California Oasis by Kilograph Studios at 2 Cal Plaza. Really, to me, one of the real stars of the show. The idea was to pick up on 2 Cal Plaza's focus on sustainability and on this natural environment. They have this gorgeous plaza out there. So the idea was to kind of pick up on that and take it to the next level and give some. But this also, what was really great about this is there's a magical, playful aspect to it, which I think is really critical. It's a critical might not be the right word, but it's a central piece of it. People really love that magic, like especially the kids. I took my kids out to this, and every time they'd be like, "Oh my God, how did that happen?" And it's a, although you sort of feel like you get it and you kind of get that it's not real, there's something about it being in a physical place that makes it feel magical. And I will say, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but one of the things that we actually discovered about this, particularly in reviewing some of the activations in this kind of a context where you're just looking at it on the screen, the magic really happens when you do it in person. In some ways, when you look at it on a screen, divorced from the physical place, it's just a piece of content, and it doesn't seem as magic. It seems like, okay, well, that's a video of something, and it's got some special effects, and that's okay. But when you do it in person, it really feels like, oh, wow, but that's not there, but it is there. And it's really special. This one, I love this piece. Jimenez Lai is a great creative architect, and I really wanted to do a big architectural piece because I think there's a great use for this technology in sort of architecture and urban planning applications. And Jimenez really stepped up. He created this just massive thing. It was a great piece too, because it was really hard to do. It was hard for him to create, and it was hard for Hoverlay to place it. And we sort of at the 11th hour, I was telling everyone, listen, if it doesn't work out, it's okay. We tried, I wanted to do this, but it's fine. At the 11th hour, we got it to really work. And it felt like this great omen for the whole project that, okay, if that one's going to work, the whole thing's going to be fine. And I really feel like that was a great triumph for us. So those are all the pieces, and you can see the variety of it. It's a real wide range. So I'll take you through a little bit of the logistics of it. So the timeline, we essentially started in earnest in June, outreaching to partners, telling them about the project, outreaching to artists. We hosted some hands-on content workshops in person and virtual. And that was really key. We got great turnout on those. People were really interested. That was part of our instinct on this, was that there was a community of artists and designers and architects who were working in this field that we could tap into, give them a platform for doing it, but also help downtown, to position downtown as a place where this was happening, as a place where people were doing this kind of work, and attract those kind of creative folks for doing that. So then we issued an RFP, got great responses. We used almost all of them. Like I think we got probably 24 proposals. We used about half of them, but they were all great. And it was really kind of an impressive list of things. So we selected the artist, and we worked with the artists back and forth to, because some were very versed in this technology, others were not. And that, again, back to the Hoverlay platform, one of the reasons we chose it is that it's user-friendly enough that artists who aren't highly technical can create for it. And that's really key for us. We didn't want this to be something that only super high-tech artists could use. But we did have to do varying levels of hand-holding on that. We, started putting them up on the platform and testing them in October. Launched it on October 22nd. We launched it at an event called Grand Ave Arts All Access, which is an annual event, a great event that all of the cultural institutions of Grand Avenue host every year, kind of an open house for the cultural institutions. It was the perfect place to launch this because we had an audience that were coming to this event. It was showcasing those cultural institutions. It became an activity that people could do as part of their coming to this event. But it also expanded the event. Most of the things that happen at Grand Avenue Arts All Access are in the buildings, at MoCA, at the Broad, inside these places. We wanted to create something that was outside. And so this became kind of a connective tissue of things that people could do outside. So it was activity outside, as well as all the individual activities. And that was really, that worked very well. Just a few key milestones, like the project guide that we created was really an important factor, because this was, was kind of talked about what the project was, what the Hoverlay platform is, gave a certain amount of guidance, not deep in the weeds on the technology, but enough that people could understand what this was. And this became our calling card to partners and artists and other participants, that like, this is what the thing is, because it's hard. People don't know what it is. It's new. And so this was very helpful. Then the workshops were great, because not only were we able to identify dozens of really talented artists who were interested in this, but also for the partners who weren't artists, like the cultural institutions and the properties, they could get a better sense of what was possible by participating in those workshops. And it fine-tuned for us where people were at with it, what was possible. We did a beta launch. There happened to be an event about a month prior to our scheduled launch. called the YMCA Stair Climb. That was a perfect opportunity for us to beta launch this, to test it, just with 3 of the activations. But it was great. It was a proof of concept. We really felt after that okay, this works. People like it. Now all we have to do is the other 4 dozen activations. Okay, so some big takeaways, and then we'll get to some Q&A here. First big one, it's about place. AR is most compelling, most relevant when it is enhancing, activating, and promoting a specific place. VR is great for going other places and being in a virtual space. AR is great for enhancing and augmenting an actual place. It's where the magic happens with AR, and it's what makes it super compelling for cities, for bids, for properties, for, and for individual businesses and cultural institutions who don't just want to promote themselves on the web so that people can see it from home, which they do want to do. They want people to come. Partnerships, absolutely key to this. It was both what made it possible, but it was also a fantastic opportunity for them because we created the platform, and that was the idea from the beginning. We would do the base level work, create the platform, but then rely on them to create most of the content. Now, we did a lot of the lifting in the beginning because it was new, but going forward, we intend, we're not a creative agency, we're not a production company. We intend for this to be something where our partners create the content. I mentioned community, it's so sort of fulfilling or sort of reinforcing to see how people use this. It was wonderful. You see these, as I said, clusters of people doing it, and just almost every one of them, it would click in and they'd say, "Oh wow!" Like if we should have videoed and had like one of those clips of like 100 different people saying, "Oh wow," because that's literally what everyone said. So it's magical and fun. But the other community that it really was important for was the creative community of artists, and then the community of cultural institutions. And part of what we really wanted to do was have this be a project that all of these people could sort of rally around. Content. It is about content in that it is not just an experience for people to do at that moment. It is really an opportunity for you to tell your stories, engage your constituents, and as I mentioned, super social media friendly. So it was really, something that, kind of the gift that keeps on giving for us. We're going to be doing promotion of the content that's out there for the next 6 months because the exhibit stays up indefinitely, probably until next October when we'll do a refresh on it. But once you've got it up, and this is the great thing, like public art is expensive and difficult to create. On this, we created 45 public artworks, in 5 months we didn't need any approvals. It cost a fraction of what it would cost to do physical public art. So it was really wonderful on that level. Really just scratching the surface on this. The opportunities are endless. We are super excited about the other things that we can do with it. It's really, the idea of adding a whole digital dimension to our district in just a myriad ways. For our events, for our tours, for promotions, exhibits, informational, wayfinding, history, art, that really is limited. We've already done a handful of them, and they're perfect examples of sort of the easy, low-hanging fruit. We do an annual Halloween event for downtown families. This year we had augmented, virtual ghosts and goblins and skeletons all around the park where the event was. The kids could find them, they could take pictures with them, added a lovely element to it. And now for the holidays, we have a Santa and his sleigh in the midst of a snowstorm with a bunch of elves and gifts all around Pershing Square. So there's basically empty park is all of a sudden filled with this holiday magic. So a lot of fun, and both of those created in-house, in the office next to mine by our graphic designer with stock 3D content and really fairly easy. So that's it. I will stop sharing my screen now. That's the end of my sort of pitch here, and I really look forward to hearing from you all. Any questions, comments, and all.
I think we had a few questions in the chat, but just I want to thank you, Nick. This was really a great summary of the project, and I'm fascinated to see the ideas that you have for the future and how you've been able to pick up the platform too. So really fascinating. So anyone wants to jump in, just unmute yourself. And
do you want to go through the questions in the chat first? So
yeah, let me do that, and then we'll take some of the questions.
Well, I'm happy to do that. I mean, I might as well. No sense in you reading it and then me doing it.
Yeah, I've answered a few already. I think one of the questions was
Okay.
about the process to select artists and if they were compensated. So maybe you can cover.
Oh, yeah. So we selected them with a an RFP process, and then once the proposals were submitted, we had a committee of folks on our team that evaluated them in terms of their creative potential, how difficult they would be, and all that. And we selected a dozen of them, and there was a $1,000 stipend associated with any of the activations that were chosen.
Thanks, Nick. There's a question from Jack. What was the total project budget?
The project budget, it ended up all in being about $50,000. That's including over 10,000 of promotion, like PR and advertising. So I would say, production costs about 40. And on the one hand, that was a fraction of what we had been pitched by other providers who were proposing a fraction of what we did. Like, I mean, just off the charts how much we got done for that amount. That said, going forward, our hope is that we will be able to do stuff for much less, because as I said, we don't have a budget to be producing content at this level on an ongoing basis. The idea was go all in on this first one to launch it, create the platform, and then going forward, we'll be able to do it much more inexpensively or rely on partners to do it, or sponsors. But yeah, that was the budget on this, which was about twice what we planned. Like I had to keep going back to the well.
Thanks, Nick. So we have a question from Stephanie, and feel free to also mute yourself, ask the question directly if you prefer, or ask follow-up questions. But there were two questions from Stephanie. What went wrong and how was it solved? So that was the first question. So maybe you can talk about that, and then we'll get to the second question.
Right. What went wrong and how is it solved? Well, one of the things that kind of almost went wrong, that we expected to go wrong, and how we solved it, is what I talked about in the beginning when we did our initial outreach. There was such a sense that that our potential partners didn't know what to do with this and how to do anything, that we were very concerned in the beginning, because they were kind of like, this is cool, but we don't know how to do this, and we don't even know what to do. And so the way we addressed that, as I mentioned, was we came up with these templates and these things that they could do at very low cost, or that we could do for them. And the other thing that we did was I was just like relentless in going back to our partners over and over saying, we can do this for you. Here's a bunch of options. We can do it for free. We can do it. So that's how we dealt with that. And then technically there were a range of glitches along the way in terms of just trying to figure out where activations should go and how they should be placed. And that was trial and error. That was just going out. Cassie and I went out multiple times, and Nicholas too, and just try it here, try it there. How is it if it's bigger? What about if we resize it this way? That was all trying to, and then there were ones that just didn't work, and we just, and we just punted on them. And I think that was a key. One of the success factors, I think, was having a relatively humble sort of approach to it, recognizing things aren't, we don't know exactly what it's going to be. We don't know what's going to work. We have to be able to cut bait on ones that aren't working. And we did, but most of them did.
Yeah, and the second question from Stephanie was, are there ways for folks without phones to access projects?
You could access them on a computer. There's no way to access them without a digital device of some sort because it's digital content. You may be getting at something which we sort of thought about and which we didn't have a good answer for, which is kind of like, what if someone doesn't have a phone, or what about as public art that should be in the public realm that, really accessible? We don't have a good answer to that. We felt like it's as accessible as it can be for digital art. You don't need a special phone for it. It doesn't cost anything. The Hoverlay doesn't even track anything, which is one of the key things. I'll just mention that too. There's always concern about, well, they're tracking me, they're tracking my phone. I don't really want to sign up for this. You don't have to do any of that with Hoverlay. It doesn't track anything on the phone, and so it's very accessible on that level.
Yeah, and one point, Nick, that I think something you did that was very interesting is for the launch, you actually brought some iPads that you placed at different locations so that people could, they could see the experience even if they never had any experience with AR.
Yeah, and that was great. We had the advantage of, we have our operations and ambassador teams were all in on this on the day of the launch. So we had, I want to say it was a dozen or so of our team members out there in their purple shirts with iPads who could show people what it was and tell them how to do it. And that was very helpful. But we also had decals on the sidewalk all through the exhibit, and the Hoverlay platform is so simple to use. It really, you didn't need much explanation. Like you scan the QR code, it opens up, you got a map, it's very intuitive. And so that was another reason why this was a great platform to use for this.
There's a question from Ron about, does the 50K amount include ongoing maintenance of whatever?
Yeah, I mean, one of the great things about this platform is exactly that there is very little ongoing maintenance. Like we can tweak things from our desktop in terms of fixing things, but unlike public art, we don't have to go out and fix anything or shine it up or secure it or maintain it in any way. And that's really an important aspect of this. We really had in mind from the beginning, can we do this in a way that will not require a lot of maintenance? Because, for example, that's why we didn't go with a native app, with creating our own app, because talk about maintenance, we would have had to keep updating that at every iteration of iPhones. And that was just not feasible. We don't have any budget for doing that. So yeah, minimal maintenance.
Thank you. So there's a great question from Deborah. So were you able to capture the revenue generated from the event? Also, if DTLA bid continues AR in the area,
areas just with local businesses and arts community,
right,
would the cost of production be shared? Yeah. So there wasn't any revenue generated from it per se, because we're a nonprofit. We weren't looking for any revenue, but you didn't have to pay anything to do it. The event was free because it's an open house by a bunch of other nonprofits. There is undoubtedly revenue and sponsorship and advertising potential from these technologies, particularly when you get into commercial uses of promoting, like we had these 360 tours of a bunch of the residential properties on Bunker Hill. Could that be monetized? Absolutely. Are we going to monetize it? Probably not. But there's undoubtedly potential. We're a little cautious about that because we're not in a big hurry to have this turn into an advertising driven or a commercial driven medium. It's going to get there. You can be sure. But we felt like we really wanted to focus on being non-commercial, particularly with all of our partners being cultural institutions. We very explicitly, and we made this clear to them up front, this is not going to come off as a heavily commercial or promotional exhibit. We want this to be about the art, about the culture, about community. So I hope that answers your question. There is potential revenue there. We didn't do it on this one. We'll explore it later on. My goal actually is more just for us personally. I'd like to get some major sponsors who can sponsor it more broadly and that don't have to do heavy promotion, but can support it as a medium, can support it as a medium for artists, for the community. That would be my optimal scenario. And then we can continue to offer it free to users, but also as a free platform for artists. One of the revenue pieces, or not revenue pieces, but one of the things that we did do is that the more commercial partners, so like the big property owners, they compensated the work that was being done, like the Leah Smithson piece at One Cal Plaza. They paid her commission, right? The Two Cal project, they paid Kilograph to do that. So there was opportunity to connect commercial entities with artists and creators in a way that generated value for those folks.
All right. So the next question from Jessica, I understand.
Yeah, that infrastructure project. Okay. I don't think LA is doing that much yet, but we have had ongoing conversations with LA in various different agencies, Metro, DOT, the city planning, historical, the heritage, because we think that there are just myriad ways that the city will be able to use this for street planning, for streetscapes, for all kinds of urbanism things, for city planning, for historical monuments, for the range is endless. And part of why we wanted to create the platform this way is that then we could turn around to the city and say, hey, partner with us, use it for your purposes. It's affordable. It's easy to do. We could show you how to do it. And, my hope is that, when we check in with you a year from now, there will be half a dozen, amazing exhibits all around downtown. And a year later, downtown will be augmented, in myriad ways, ranging from practical infrastructure to wayfinding, to promotion, to art. Did we investigate working with the Central Library to borrow devices and increase? That's a great idea. Didn't and should. And that's something we did partner with the library. They had an activation themselves. We partnered with them on creating some of the content. But it's a great idea to have them provide the devices and have it be. Especially because it's a great educational thing for kids too. Could the city of LA itself be a sponsor? Absolutely. In fact, the city of LA has a project called Augmented LA, I think it is, and it wasn't quite getting off the ground. We were trying to partner with them in the beginning, and I got the sense that their project was not going to move as quickly as our project. And so we eventually decided to go it on our own, but also let them know, hey, we are happy to partner. And if we launch this thing and you guys still want to do it, we're totally open to that. Connectivity required. Good question, Jack. I will kind of put that on to Nicholas. I think that one of the things that we found is that the connectivity was for the most part sufficient on Bunker Hill, but would be even better if it was faster. And one of the sponsors I'd love to have is a provider who can tout what you can do with 5G, because this is the type of stuff that you could really go to town with if you've got super high speed connectivity.
Yeah, and
Nicholas,
I think
do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think this is one thing to pay attention to. Like it's getting better with 5G being deployed and so on. But if you're doing something in a remote area, spending time to understand the coverage, I think is important, because at the end of the day, I mean, it has to get through to the phone. The content has to get there one way or another. So.
Well, and to get a little bit in the weeds on it, one of the things that we sometimes had trouble with was that if the connectivity wasn't great because there's a bunch of towers around, and so the GPS isn't working that well, you sometimes wouldn't get the activation in exactly the right place. And that spoke to where this technology really sings, is where it's really locked into the location in a precise place, not just an artwork that's floating in a general area. I mean, that can work and that's fine. But what's really compelling is when it really feels like it's anchored to that specific place. And that requires that the GPS be working well,
Yeah, and also we use different techniques in those cases, like using stickers that were used as trigger points. So you can have like a big experience that unfolds from that single point, but you always know that the starting point is the same for everybody. And it's a way to offset some of those, issues with placement.
Yeah, and just one more sort of in the weeds point about that is that while we did use those decals and where we needed to, where a thing had to be really precisely anchored, we looked at it as a crutch that we ideally didn't want to use, or wanted we wanted it to be a last resort, because we really felt like this needed to be something that you could just do with the phone off the map and not have to rely on, because some of those stickers are gone now, and I don't want to have to keep going out and maintaining it, to Ron's point. But it also felt a little bit like a crutch, like we wanted these to work without any requirement for that. Okay. Did DTLA work with? Yeah, Kinfolk. We actually did. We weren't able to include their piece in the final analysis because there were some issues about the location and various things. They do great work. We will very much include them in the future. Love the stuff that they're doing. Feel like as in terms of their idea of monuments, it's a great use of the technology. And we absolutely intend on using them in the future. It just was like, it was one of those things where I was at the last minute, didn't quite work, had to punt. They understood, we understood. It was, it was fine. So I guess we're right about at the end.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. I'll punt it back over to Nicholas, but I just want to say thank you all for taking the time to be on this with us, because as you could tell, this was a really a real passion project for me. I was super excited to do it. Cassie and Nicholas and Milan and the whole Hoverlay team was so great to work with. We're super excited to do more of this. So if you know anyone who wants to be involved in this, we like I said, this is just the beginning. We'd love to partner with anyone who's interested in doing it. And just get in touch, and we'll have a recording of this that we'll send out in case you want to share it, or if you didn't get to see the whole thing. Nicholas,
Oh, thank you, Nick.
final words?
This was absolutely great, I think. And just want to thank you for, being a partner, partnering with you on this. You've been great. And I think there's a lot, I think, to be learned from this project, but also what you have in mind in the future. So, if you're okay with it, we may have you back here, maybe talk about you too, and the next barrier that you've
listen, I already have a long memo, DTLA Augmented 2.0. The last shout out I will give, I want to make sure that I really give a lot of credit and thanks to all of the cultural institutions who partnered with us. MoCA, the Broad Music Center, Colburn. They were fantastic partners. It couldn't have happened without them. I also want to thank the dozen artists who were just amazing and worked really hard on and created great work. And the property owners. This was truly a fantastic partnership across this wide spectrum. And I just want to make sure that I thank everyone for that.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, everybody.